Hello, 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 hello. Okay, there we go. Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. All right, sorry guys. I had to figure out which one of my mics was on and which one wasn't. All that great stuff. Little tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. I am running late. Um, Quick little thing. This episode was actually supposed to be an actual like episode on TV. That's what it was written for. And some stuff happened, and well, there's a lot of people that don't want this out there. I'm just gonna be frank with you. And it got slammed down each time we tried to submit it. Yeah, I mean, it got go, and then there was supposed to be funding for it, and there's a couple of different parts, so I'm going to have to read those, just in general. I'll let you know who it is that's speaking or whatever, but um, it is what it is. But this is some information that does need to be out there, and it's sitting on my desk, and well, it's not doing anyone any good here, and it's not in any book at the moment. If you haven't read the book, I suggest you go read the book, Dr. Mary's Monkeys. It's a yellow, thick, hardback, and it goes into some research and stuff that happened in Louisiana, New Orleans, and it covers JFK, it covers AIDS, it covers CIA, it covers the Cuba stuff. Even covers some time travel stuff. I mean, it is a wild book. And I was introduced to this by, the writer. And I done some work behind it and looked, and he done some more work, and he handed me a flash drive, and I have been trying to bring it out ever since. In any case, maybe this will fall into the right hands, and maybe somebody will, add this to a new book or whatever. I don't plan on writing another one. They're doing an update for it. But the information should be out there. There will also be a auto read version, of course. I'll try my best. But as you can see, this has screen notes and stage notes, and we even had a lady that was going to play Mary. Anyway, so it would have done more for you guys and more for everyone to get the information across if we were able to act this out the way we were supposed to, and we were not. Anyway, my father was a doctor, not a famous doctor, not a controversial doctor, just a doctor in New Orleans who knew things. Things he probably shouldn't have known, and who, every once in a while, will look at me in a particular expression. Not fear exactly, more like caution. I was a kid, I noticed. My father knew a woman named Mary Sherman. Mary Sherman, Dr. Mary Sherman. She was one of the most prominent cancer researchers in the American South. Tulane University. Impeccable credentials. Kind of scientist who got things done quietly and brilliantly in an era when women in science had been twice as brilliant just to be half as visible. We saw that in NASA, and we saw that in other fields. In 1964, Dr. Mary Sherman was found dead in her New Orleans apartment. She had been stabbed. Her right arm and a portion of her torso was almost completely incinerated. The arm incinerated in an apartment with no fire damage. The police called it a homicide and quietly let it go cold. My father never talked about it directly, but he knew her. And something about the way he didn't talk about her told me everything. So I started digging. And once you start digging in New Orleans in the early 1960s, you don't find one thing. You find everything at once, all tangled together. Cancer research, covert operations, a little office on Magazine Street, a man named Lee Harvey Oswald, and a secret so large it was hiding in plain sight for 40 years. Now let me give you the landscape first. The geography of the secret. In 1955, the Salk polio vaccine is a triumphant thing. Church bells ring, parents weep with relief. Polio had terrorized American children for decades. Iron lungs, paralysis, death. And now there's a needle that can stop it. Millions of doses are prepared and administered. Now, I want you to hang on to the thing about polio. Polio was great. I mean, the vaccine was great. It helped us. It helped everything and stopped things from happening. But there's some stuff behind it. What nobody knows yet is this. The polio vaccine has been grown in the kidney cells of the Reese monkeys. And those monkeys were carrying a virus. A virus that had never been in a human before. It was called SB40, Simian virus 40, the 40th monkey virus they had found after they went looking. There was 40 viruses of them in there. And by the time they found it, between 1955 and 1963, somewhere between 98 million and 300 million Americans had already been injected with it. They were injected with the SV40, the virus from the monkeys. They were injected with the cure for polio. And here's the part that doesn't make it into the official history. There's the part that they're not going to tell you about. There's the part you're not going to see in records and history books and medical books, and there's the things that doctors are not even going to talk about. And if you bring it up, some of them will even kick you out of their office. I have. SV40 causes cancer. I'm going to say that again. SV40 causes cancer. Specifically, it causes the kind of rare, aggressive cancers, soft tissue sarcomas, methyliomas, whatever, childhood brain tumors that began appearing in American populations in the late 1960s and never went away. A cure may have brought on something so bad that, anyway, you get the point. Now, the government knew. The government knew about this from the beginning. The government knew about SV40. The government knew about the cancers. Well, the scope. They knew by 1961, and they quietly reformulated the vaccine. They said nothing publicly. Because what would you say? We have given cancer to hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions of children. There was no press conference for that. There is no grateful way out of that sentence. So instead, they did the next logical thing. They tried to fix it in secret. Now, we'll move over to the secret laboratory. There's supposed to be a tape recorder for this one, but I don't have it here yet. Dr. Alton Osser. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm probably messing it up. He's passed away, and if you hear me from the afterlife, please forgive me. He was a giant in American medicine. He founded the Oskerner Clinic in New Orleans, one of the most respected medical institutions in the country. I've been down there. I just can't, for some reason, I can't pronounce it. He was a quack. He was. Anyway. Sorry, I was in your chat. Presidents of the American Cancer Society operated on President Eisenhower, a man with enormous prestige and, as it turns out, deeply committed and anti-communist convictions. In the early 1960s, he quietly assembled a small team. The mission, as best it could have been reconstructed, to develop a cancer-causing biological weapon, a virus, that could be used to assassinate Fidel Castro. You heard me correctly. The CIA, in the aftermath of the Bay of Pigs, was not trying to poison Castro with a cigar or a wetsuit. A cancer dart was not outside the realm of possibility, and here, conveniently, was a public health crisis that had already generated significant expertise in cancer-causing monkey viruses. The team working on this project, including Dr. Mary Sherman. It also, and this is where the story gets legs, that will carry it all the way through Dallas. It included a young man named David Ferry. David Ferry, pilot, hypnotist, pedophile, cancer researcher. Yes, cancer researcher. Ferry had no medical degree. He had had a scientific mind in a basement full of mice. Literally, he was running cancer experiments in his own apartment with a laboratory of mice. He was connected to the CIA, to the anti-Castro exile community in New Orleans, and critically to Lee Harvey Oswald. And now we no longer are in the world of public health. We are somewhere else entirely. Now, this is something you're not going to find in the book. This is something you're not going to find anywhere online. I have written testimony from the tape, from the laboratories. Anyway, I'll read it to you. Now, Ferry, to the unseen Mary. You want to know if I'm qualified. I want to know if you care. That's my question. That matters. Do you care if it works? Because I care if it works. My credentials are not the results, Dr. Sherman. You look at what's happened with these mice and you tell me I don't know what I'm doing. He moves. This is Dr. Judith now, a composite lab assistant, young, cautious, and morally uneasy. Dr. Judith. I told myself it was for the greater good. The phrase. We said it a lot. We said it in a way that you would say grace, fast, automatic, not really testing the words. The greater good. The 100 million people exposed, the greater good. A cancer weapon. Horry Ford and head of state, the greater good. I was 26 years old. And I was very good at not asking the questions underneath the question. Now there's a technician. I don't know his name, but he's listed on the document. He sounds like an older, dry man, but he's very focused. The cultures were kept at specific temperatures. The mice were numbered. The results were logged in a particular code. Not because we were hiding anything, we told ourselves, but because the work was sensitive. National security. You don't put national security in a spiral notebook. The logbooks were kept by Dr. Sherman. She was meticulous. She logged everything. After she died, the logbooks were never found. I logged the mice. I logged the cultures. And there were 37 mice on the day she stopped coming in. Nobody ever told me what happened to the 37 mice. In the summer of 1963, a young man was handing out pro-Castro leaflets on the streets of New Orleans. His name was Lee Harvey Oswald. or that was one of his names on that day. Oswald was, at minimum, a man of multiple allegiances and performed identities. His office address for the Fair Play Cuba community was 544 Camp Street, New Orleans. The same building. Now, take this in. The same building, the same entrance as the offices of Guy Bannister, the ex-FBI, rabidly anti-Castro CIA asset. A man handing out pro-Castro leaflets, working out of the anti-Castro intelligence office. That is a classic intelligence operation. Building a legend, creating a paper trail. Oswald was being manufactured as a visible leftist so that when something happened and something was being planned, an arrow of suspicion would point in a clean, legible direction. But here's the thread that Halston pulls, that nobody else quite pulled the same way. Oswald, landlady on Magazine Street, later recalled that he had been seen inside the company of a man matching David Ferry's description. I'm going to remind you, he's the one that was inside the lab. That he had been inside the laboratory where the cancer virus work had been done. Oswald was placed inside the lab. Well, the person claiming to be Oswald was placed inside the lab. Lee Harvey Oswald, whatever else he was, may have been a courier, a handler, a low-level operative, and a secret cancer research program ran out of the private home in New Orleans, directed at the foreign head of state in the summer before the assassination of the American president. And I want to be precise here because this material is easy to misuse. Edward Housel is careful. He is not saying he can prove a unified conspiracy. He is saying these people knew each other. These operations overlapped. The geography of New Orleans in 1963 is very small. In the circles of the intelligent community, the medical community, the exile community were not separate circles. They were one circle. And in the middle of that circle was Dr. Mary Sherman. Now, this is something else you're not going to read in the book. As far as I know, there is no documented evidence of a transcript or conversation that Mary had. Well, I have one. Anyway, Mary, I want to tell you something about what it is a woman doing this kind of work in 1963. You are never, not once, not for a single morning, not aware that you are a woman doing this kind of work. It is in every room you enter. It is the way a man pauses before he addresses you. In a way, your name appears second on the paper you just wrote first. I was the foremost expert on bone cancer in the American South. I published, I taught, I trained surgeons. I have a endowed chair. And I was still the one who asked to fetch the coffee when the administrators came down from Tulane. I fetched the coffee because the work mattered. The work mattered more than the coffee, more than the insult, more than the 10,000 small daily indications that this world was not built for me. When Dr. Ulster came to me and he explained what had happened with the vaccine and what he needed, I did not say no. I want you to understand why. I had spent my career watching cancer eat people from the inside. And I had held the hands of children, and I had told mothers, and I stood in rooms where there was nothing more to do, nothing more to say. And I had stood there anyway because someone had to. If there was a chance even a covert, unacknowledged, official, non-existent chance to understand this virus, to stop it. I found a mechanism to break it before it broke a generation. So she said yes. I want you to understand, I said yes to science. I told myself the politics were someone else's problem. That was my mistake. When you say yes to science and no to politics, the politics don't go away. They just proceed without your input. She looks at her right hand. I knew this laboratory. I knew its rhythms, its temperatures, and its failures. I knew every culture. I knew what we were building or trying to build, and I knew what we were losing control of at a mutation rate. The accelerator was giving us results nobody had predicted. Virulence far beyond the model suggested. I wrote a report. I wrote a very careful, very precise report saying we had gone too far, and this was no longer a targeted weapon. This is something we do not understand. We must stop. I put it into proper channels. Nothing happened, so I wrote another one. She stops and something crosses her face. This was on July 1964. Now, before we move to the next part. No, I think I'm just going to move to the next part. You'll get it. The linear particle accelerator. Here's the piece that stopped me cold when I read the book. Hansel's research. And he is working partially from his father's knowledge, partially from declassified documents, partially from source interviews suggesting that the cancer virus was being developed by Sherman's team was being mutated, accelerated, made more brilliant using a particle accelerator. Specifically, a linear particle accelerator located at the U.S. Public Health Services Hospital in New Orleans. Why does this matter for Mary Sherman's death? Because the linear particle accelerator produces enormous quantities of radiation, enough to destroy organic tissue very rapidly, enough to, and he makes the argument, forensically, with some care, enough to explain the incineration of Dr. Mary Sherman's right arm and torso. The official story is she was stabbed, then her body was partially burned in a cover-up, then moved to her apartment to create a crime scene. His theory is different. He believes she suffered a catastrophic accident at the linear particle accelerator, that her arm, her dominant hand, the hand she used to handle the viral cultures, was vaporized by a radiation event, and that the stabbing came afterward, either as a mercy killing or as a cover-up, and her body was moved. The police never investigated the particle accelerator. The particle accelerator was never mentioned in any report. It sat there at a federal facility in plain sight. That's the thing about the biggest secrets. They don't hide. They just sit there, slightly off to the side where anyone thinks to look. Now, voices from the accelerator, the operator, the technician. The machine itself was a research instrument, legitimate cancer research, you understand. This was not some underground facility. This was a federal hospital. You signed in, you wore a badge, and there were protocols for everything. Distant protocols, exposure time protocols, everything written down. Just like these papers here. The protocol assumed that you were working with standard materials. They didn't have protocols for what Dr. Sherman was doing that night. the night guard. I'm not supposed to talk about this. I have not talked about this for 40 years. And I'm not. Look. I'm only saying what I saw. Which is that there were lights on in the accelerator building at 2 in the morning. And there were people I didn't recognize going in. That's what I saw. I wrote it in my log. The log from that period is gone, but I wrote it. The physicist. The problem with irradiating a viral culture in accelerator is the feedback. You're trying to induce specific mutations, but radiation don't read your intentions. It does what it does. We were running cultures at exposure limits in retrospect that we should not have been running. Nobody said stop. Nobody wanted to say stop because the results were interesting. You know what scientists are like when the results are interesting? We are very bad at saying stop. She was meticulous. She was the most disciplined person in the room on any given night. What happened to her arm, whatever happened on that last night, it was not carelessness. Something failed, either a shield or a calculation or a protocol that someone had quietly removed from the sequence because it slowed down the timeline. The timeline was always the pressure. The timeline was always somebody in a suit at the other end of a phone call. I don't know who made the phone call that night. I don't know what they said. I know the lights were on until 4 in the morning. And I know the next morning the room had been cleaned. Cleaned the way rooms are cleaned when something has to disappear. Mary, the accelerator was beautiful. That sounds wrong, I know. But if you understand what it does, the precision of it, the elegance, there is a beauty in that kind of instrument. That has nothing to do with its purpose. We were working on the virus at night because the machine was in official use during the day. Legitimate research, cancer treatment research, which was also our work in a different sense. We were always moving between purposes. That is the thing that eroded me, not the fear, not the secrecy, moving between the purpose. In the morning, I was a cancer researcher trying to save lives, and at night, I was a cancer researcher trying to build a weapon. I told myself these were the same project. That understanding the virus in one context would illuminate the other. I told myself that for 3 years. I stopped believing it 6 months before I died. Well, she didn't. I added that. I want to tell you something about that night. Now, this is speculation. Based on what she said, and what the physicist said, and what the night guard said, you can only imagine what, if you were able to ask her what she saw, what she felt, what she experienced, what she went through. And this is what I think she would have said. I want to tell you what it is to be alone in a room with a machine that is larger than you and more powerful than you understand for the first time that you have been lied to about its parameters for the experiment. Not lied to by the researcher. Not exactly. Lied by omission. By the gradual adjustment of what is expected without corresponding adjustments of what is said. The exposure time that night was longer than I had been told it would be. I noticed it when I looked at the clock. I was reaching for the control panel when a particular kind of silence after a catastrophic event, before the pain, before the understanding, just silence. I remember the silence, the blue light, whole long moment that slowly fades and she doesn't move. Darkness. Now, I don't know what happened to her after that. What I can gather from the security guard and what I can gather from the other physicists, like the security guard was spoken to 40 years after the event. I think it was 30, 40 years, something like that. I know she was in there. I know she experienced whatever it was she experienced. And like I said, I encourage you guys, you can find a copy online. You don't have to go out and buy it. You can go find a copy online. You can read it. If this kind of thing interests you, you should. This is one of the wildest, to me at the time, conspiracy theory that people were talking about and didn't want to talk about. And I obsessed over it so much, I wrote a script and went and did my own research and talked to people I probably shouldn't have. That's what happened. That's what killed this project. And I wish it didn't, because, you know, the last moments of the research team and the things that went on, they'll never be heard except on some silly YouTube channel. Now, I want to talk about the guy. This is a direct address to Edward Housen. This is the guy that wrote the first book. Ed, you don't know me. We've never met. But I've spent over the last 6 months with your book in my hands. And there's something I need to say to you directly. Thank you. Not for the conclusions. Conclusions in this territory is always provincial. You know that better than anybody. But for the act of following the thread, for carrying enough to go back to New Orleans, to knock on the doors, to sit in archives, and to ask your father the question children are not supposed to ask their fathers. It takes a particular kind of courage that doesn't get credit. It's not the courage of the whistleblower. You're not exposing a present injustice. You're illuminating a past one. People who could destroy you for doing it have mostly died. The institution that wanted this buried has had 50 years to consolidate its preferred narrative. And yet, you still had to know. You couldn't let it go. I recognize that. I recognize that in my bones. But I always wanted to ask you something. Did you ever consider stopping? I have. There's a moment in research like this. I think you know the moment I mean. Where the information you assembled stops being academic. Where it stops being a puzzle and starts being a weight. Where you realize that knowing the things means being changed by it. And you can't put it down, that it will follow you. Did you sit with your father, silence, and feel the pull toward just leaving it? I think you did. I think that's in the book too, between the lines. The reason I trust your work is not because it's airtight. It isn't entirely airtight. And you would be the first to say so. I trust it because I can feel you wrestled with it. Because the book reads like a man who is afraid of what he has found and who is writing it down anyway because it's alternative. Silence. The same silence that killed the story 40 years ago or worse. He wrote about a woman who wrote reports that went into proper channels and vanished. You made sure yours didn't vanish. Her name was Mary Sherman. You said it clearly and loudly and on the record. That matters. And I don't know if that's enough. I don't think it's enough. Not for what was done. Not for what has cascaded from what has done. The cancers and everything. But it's not nothing. It's not nothing, Ned. My generation grew up with cancer. I don't mean we encountered it. I mean we grew up with it. As a fact of life. A background radiation of fear. A thing that happens to people in numbers that would have unthinkable to our grandparents. Soft tissue sarcomas, childhood leukemias, a particular strain of lung cancer showing up in people who have never smoked. Epidermal curve bent in the late 1960s and never came back. And there are researchers, peer-reviewed, published serious researchers who have found SV40 genetic material in human tumor samples. We have replicated the findings, who have been largely ignored by the public health establishment, because the public health establishment has a very strong institutional interest in the polio vaccine being a triumph. And it mostly was. Let me be clear. Polio was a horror. The vaccine was a miracle. And the people who developed it were heroes. But miracles can have shadow sides. And heroes can make catastrophic errors. And institutions, when faced with catastrophic errors, they cannot undo, sometimes choose to silence over accountability or just look over them. What Edward asked us to do is not condemn the past, but look at it, to follow the threads where they actually go, rather than where we wish they went. Dr. Mary Sherman spent the last years of her life working on a problem she may not have fully understood. She was brilliant and dedicated and died horribly in circumstances that were never honestly explained. And for that, I don't think that she will be able to rest properly. The least we can do is say her name and ask the question she was never allowed to answer. Now, that's it. There was some other stuff that I wanted to add later, but it was more for the show. Um, like I said, this show, this episode, this was a standalone TV episode that was supposed to air. Each person had a scene they played, and we took, documents and things like that. I never got to meet Ed. I wish I did. But I wish the larger audience could have saw this. Not just you guys, but a larger audience. Anyway, stay paranoid, my friends. At least it's out here. And thank you for being here. We're going to go to sleep. I'll see you guys tomorrow.